Good morning. We're just getting started, letting folks in. So just hang tight and we'll get started in a few minutes, or maybe less. Good morning. Folks are just arriving, so please hang tight and we'll just get started in a moment. Okay, we've got pretty light attendance this morning, but we'll go ahead and again, just give folks another minute. And out of respect for everyone's time, we'll go ahead and get started. If folks join us along the way, I'm sure it'll be easy enough to get them caught up. All right, let's see, got 3 minutes after. Well, we'll go ahead and get started. And I'm not sure if attendees can see other attendees. I believe you can. So if so, good. If not, feel free. Let's see, we have the chat enabled. So if you'd like to give us a message, feel free to. Also, we will, let's see. First off, we will be recording this session, so you're aware of that. Sorry, my loss of manners here. I'm Ed Shikata, City Manager here in Palo Alto, and I'd like to welcome you to our listening session, community listening session with respect to the selection of our next Chief of Police. So let's see, if you aren't able to see the attendees, we've actually only got 4 people who are here at this moment, in addition to our staff. But as I said, why don't we go ahead and get started? I've got a few minutes of quick overview that I'd like to provide in order to give folks a general foundation for the discussion and input we'll get today. And let's see, so make sure if folks are comfortable with that. I believe you had to click OK on the record in order to get this, so hopefully that's not a surprise to anyone. All right, so why don't we go ahead and get started? We've got a few slides here. Hopefully you can see those. First off, let me hand it off to Megan Horrigan-Taylor, our Chief Communications Official, to chat about our poll. Go ahead,
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us on a Saturday. We appreciate it. We did want to just check in with everyone to see how they heard about today's session. And so we are going to do a quick poll. It's in the Zoom, so I'm going to launch the poll right now. It's just one question on how you heard about the meeting. So feel free to click one question or multiple questions, different ways that you may have heard about the session today. We'd appreciate any feedback about that as well.
As you may know, we've pushed this out through multiple channels, and so we'd like to just get a confirmation of how folks have heard about this session. This is the second of 3 sessions that we'll be holding, and so appreciate your giving us that feedback so we know which of any of our methods of distribution are getting the most traction.
Thank you. So I'll end the poll there. And just to share the results, the majority of the folks heard it through the city council meeting, through the city manager comments, and or the city blog. Thank you very much for sharing your input with us.
Okay, terrific. Thank you very much for that. All right, let's go ahead. Got our next slide up here. First, let me give you a quick overview of the Palo Alto Police Department. For those who may not be familiar with the way the department's organized and its size. Overall, with the city of Palo Alto, we've got about 1,000 employees. So we're a fairly large organization for our size of city, really reflecting the range of services that our city's involved with. I think most notably our utilities department that makes up about 1/4 of that workforce. So focusing on the police department here, our police department has 79 sworn positions, typically officer and officer command positions, plus 6 reserve officer positions, as well as about 50 non-sworn or depending on how you are used to the terminology, civilian positions. I know that's a bit of a dated term, but again, folks are used to different terms as it applies to police departments. The department itself is organized into 3 divisions. The first is field services, which is the division that most of our residents and community members have interaction with. The patrol unit, which it really reflects the officers who are out and about through the city, traffic unit and parking enforcement that you'll see around town. There's also the administrative services division that includes personnel and training, communications and dispatch functions, as well as the records section in the police department. And then finally, the investigative services, which includes detectives, evidence and property staff for handling of evidence and property, and animal services, really animal control, given that our animal shelter services are contracted with a nonprofit partner. Just to give you a sense of the magnitude of activity, the police department received just over 38,000 calls for service in last calendar year. That's actually down from a typical annual, which is over 50,000 calls that were annually received pre-pandemic. Certainly we expect that number to increase again as we come out of the pandemic phase. And then finally, that our dispatch center is actually the second most busy call center within Santa Clara County, second only to San Jose in terms of the volume of calls received, given the range of services, once again, that our call center provides service to. Next slide, please. Okay, some additional sources for information, if you're interested, include our variety of methods of communication that our police staff use for keeping the community aware of what's going on. First is police logs that are issued almost daily, as well as news releases whenever there's a notable incident or action taken by the police department. Those releases and other information are often posted and pushed out through social media. We're on a number of sites, including Nixle and Facebook and Twitter. The police website provides a variety of information resources, including specifically an accountability page indicating a number of areas of activity that department and the city's been involved with over the last couple of years. And finally, our newest addition to information provided to the community includes our police calls for service interactive map, which is now providing near real-time information on calls for service around town. Then some statistics, I won't go through these in particular, but they do provide some statistics on crimes that have been responded to over the course of the last really 10 years. And you can see the range of crime allegations that are, again, the basis for calls that our department responds to. Next slide, please. Okay, now let's talk a bit about what we're doing here today. This is a virtual community listening session. We thought that the virtual platform provides the best convenience for community members to participate in. We're doing this session here today. We had an earlier session with the Human Relations Commission of the city. And then we'll have a third session on a weeknight that's next week, Thursday, March 31st. In order to give a variety of days and times that folks can participate with us live, as well as an online input form that we've got at that website that's at the bottom of the slide here, cityofpaloalto.org/police chief selection, all one word, just to make it easy, I guess you could say. So we've got a variety of methods through which community members can give us input. And again, look forward to getting your feedback here today. Next slide, please. Then in terms of our next steps, again, this community input phase will continue through this month. then the themes that we received will be posted online at this webpage, as well as reported out in my updates to the City Council. And that will really inform the process and our next steps going forward. So with that, next slide, please. All right, so specifically for this discussion, certainly open to any comments you'd like to give us, but there, as a means of just providing some prompt, we did pose a couple of questions here. The first being, what are your community priorities for the department overall? And then secondly, what are the key skills needed specifically for the next police chief as this selection effort goes underway? So thought this might be a helpful prompt for you to be able to speak both to the department overall, as well as to the police chief specifically. Next slide, please. All right, now for today, a few process suggestions here. First off, that community members interested in giving us feedback, go ahead and you can raise your hand using the Zoom raise hand feature, and then we'll call on you in turn. Would note that speakers that have not spoken at our prior session at the Human Relations Commission will be given priority to speak first. And then let's see, missed that on that first bullet, that each person will be asked to limit your comments to 5 minutes, or as the time is needed within 5 minutes. And then finally, ask that you be respectful of others, as well as respond to those 2 questions if you could. Then for any community members, and if you'd like to pass the word on to others that you know that are not comfortable with sharing their feedback live, then they can go to our webpage and either submit the online form or email me directly at citymanager, CITYMGR, at cityofpaloalto.org. All right, next slide, please. Okay, so that was it. With that, we'll open it up for comments and feedback folks would like to give us. I see we have, now we've got a couple of folks that have raised their hands. Now, let me look back on my notes. I believe it's Mr. Person, P-E-R-S-Y-N, had not spoken previously. So why don't we ask him to comment first?
Tim, I'll click the button to allow you to speak. You can just unmute and you should be able to provide your comments. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Tim Persine, and I'm a resident of Palo Alto. I've been living here for about 7 or 8 years. And can you hear me okay?
Yes, perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so my comment is that I demand that the next Palo Alto police chief address anti-Black attitudes in the department and change department culture. 6 of 79 officers sued the city over the Black Lives Matter mural, and there must have been other officers who silently supported that suit. I think the police chief must have been aware of these anti-Black attitudes in the department, but what proactive steps did he take to address these? The lawsuit over the mural was not about pain inflicted on fragile police officers by a Assata Shakur painting. Instead, the lawsuit was about shutting down a show of support for Black humanity. And I would like to know, what will the next police chief do to change the culture of that department? Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comment, Mr. Persine.
The next person that has their hand raised is Aaron James. Mr. James, I'm allowing you to speak. You just need to unmute.
Okay, by the way, Ms. Taylor, thank you for sending me out the notice so that I could be here promptly at the meeting. I was at the last, on March 10th, the meeting with the Human Relations meeting. Some of my comments at that meeting were reported out in the weekly that came out yesterday, titled "Residents Demand More Transparency, Accountability into the Next Police Chief." And I've made it really clear that the accountability, the transparency, the priorities for me are integrity, accountability, transparency, And Ed, Mr. Shikata, I have a lot of respect for you, as I've said before, but I found you to be, over the period of time that the police chief, Robert Johnson, has been in office, complicit with all of his rollbacks on our civil liberties. You're his boss. And I don't think you've made that clear enough to the public that you could have fired him by now. You could have refused to allow him to encrypt the radio transmission. You could have demanded that he got out the tape in the Aleo matter in a timely fashion, in the Gustavo Alvarez matter that took place over at Buena Vista. You could have ensured that somebody from your office had gotten out there to make sure that the police reports weren't written falsely, and could have obtained the videotapes from Gustavo Alvarez and his family. So, I've given you a grade, not overall as a city manager, but particularly as to policing. And I told you, you've gotten an F. And you would not, even on the 10th, with everybody demanding, including the chair. And I thought everybody from the HRC was particularly articulate. I go to those meetings on a regular basis. By the way, I don't see the clock up there, so I'm not have no sense of how long I'm into this. And I don't like going over a lot of time. So if that could be put up, I'd appreciate it. Mr. Shikata, there's a big demand for having at least the three finalists come into town. I'd like to see the city council be able to question them, and then community members as well in a dignified, polite manner. I thought that Chairperson Coloma Smith's comment to you at the HRC was very clear. If you don't do that and you just foist your choice of a police chief on the city of Palo Alto, that new chief is, as Coloma Smith said, going to be right behind the 8 ball from the very beginning. They're going to have no trust in it, because if you really want to put up on this board integrity, accountability, and transparency, it starts with the person that runs the city. You had a big day yesterday, and I'm not making light of that, but in the Palo Alto Daily Post, it's got manager told council, but not public, the public on Cumberleys, the flooding over there, and also in terms of the timing on the Center for the Pets and when we're going to take on new leadership. Also, I think it behoove you, hopefully you read the paper yesterday, Josh Becker's got a bill that would end police radio silence statewide. And I know that you're going to have a conference study session with the police on the 4th. And again, in reference to transparency, it's not going to be enough to just have you, Molly Stump, the police chief, and other members of the police talking about why it's critical that you can't and why you can't end encryption. You need to have some people from the other side. Otherwise, it's simply you and the city monologuing without any real dialogue. So I hope that you will explain to the people as this process goes on that you're the boss of the police, and therefore you're complicit when you don't take steps. I do think that it's critical. There was some very interesting points met at the IPA study session the other night. You were there. We've got to have a big priority on other officers being trained to intervene so we don't have a repeat of the George Floyd matter here in Palo Alto. But as was said, it's not enough to just train them. Then you've got to do the yearly audits on those sort of things. The audit on the hiring process, I thought, was a really good idea. I thought that the police are willing to now, every time a IPA report comes out, to give their formal responses. So when recommendations for change are made by the IPA, we get to find out whether the police department actually implemented them. You're the leader, you're the boss, you can talk about that. Also, I've been going after you for 4 or 5 years on your refusal to release the investigation in the Perone matter. The last speaker talked about, a culture of racism in the police department. Well, the Perone matter started before the current chief. The Perone matter happened back during the Dennis Burns incident, but the last speaker was brilliant. With the Black Lives Matter lawsuit, it wasn't just about fragile officers. It was more about a hatred, in my estimation, by the Palo Alto Police Department for Black people and Black officers. Yes, it was great that the chief announced that they'd hired one Black police officer now, but we don't want tokenism. We want to have Black police officers in leadership positions, people that you can recruit, okay, from other departments that have a long history of engaging in civil rights, promoting civil rights, while promoting safe streets, the balance that the city is asking for. Again, I don't see a clock, and I don't want to overspeak. I would like to kind of get some sense of where I am in this this talk. I don't want to monopolize any.
Mr. James, you have about 1 minute left. Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you for that. So, Mr. Shikana, it's really incumbent on you to no longer keep this process transparent. It's almost, well, it is ironic that you'd have a listening tour on the characteristics that the city of Palo Alto and the community wants, but then not commit to saying, yeah, at least the last three people, the last three finalists are going to be brought into town and subject to scrutiny. So immediately the police chief that is selected will be partly the choice of the community, not just you, and maybe a phone call to Mr. Janalco. Janalco doesn't live in this community. Yeah, he's got a lot of experience as an IPA and recruiting and hiring, but you want, Mr. Shikana, and you do a great job in other areas of keeping our community informed on COVID, on updates, parades, but policing, I think you're just afraid to take on the police chief. You're afraid to take on the police culture. And I understand that.
Mr. James, your time is up.
Okay, well, thank you all and both.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. James. All right, any of our other participants like to make a comment?
I don't see any hand raised.
Okay. Well, we've covered the material we have for today. Again, actually, we'll hopefully be able to provide a high-level summary at the council meeting on Monday, and really we'll try to redouble our outreach for attendance at the Thursday session. So again, please feel free to pass along the word and look for more information to come. And let's see, oh, I suspect we'll do once again as we did today, a bit of a poll at the beginning to see how folks are hearing about the session. So again, thank you all for participating here today, and look forward to our next steps in this important process. All right, I think with that,
Thank you.
go ahead and end. Thank you.